"This just shows you're not truly committed to our team, Ethan," Marcus Thorne said, leaning back in his oversized leather chair, as if he were doing me a monumental favor by firing me. "My name is Ethan Hayes. For 4 long years, I'd poured my energy into NovaCore Dynamics, bringing in millions in revenue while my own bank account barely budged. 29 years old, still hunting for bargains, still driving the decade-old sedan my folks helped me get back in college." I looked at Marcus, our vice president of sales, with his perfectly tailored suit and a mid-March tan that definitely wasn't from Raleigh, North Carolina. He was waiting for me to argue, to plead. "I understand," I said calmly. His eyebrow twitched, clearly not the dramatic scene he'd anticipated. "You're terminated, effective immediately. Clean out your desk. April will escort you." I nodded, stood, and even offered a handshake across his vast desk. He hesitated, surprised before taking it. "Thank you for the opportunity," I said, meaning none of it. The walk back to my cubicle was a quiet parade of averted eyes and stolen glances. If you're ready for a story about corporate backstabbing and ultimate vindication, make sure you subscribe to Life Stories. I'd landed at NovaCore Dynamics straight out of State University, armed with a business degree and a decent GPA. What I really had was a knack for talking to people, for understanding their needs and finding solutions. My dad, a 30-year veteran of pharmaceutical sales, always said, "A good salesman sells products, Ethan. A great one solves problems." He'd missed a fair share of my baseball games, but ensured we never worried about the essentials. He was proud when I got the NovaCore job, saw it as a company with potential. For the first 2 years, I bought into that vision. I worked 60-hour weeks, immersing myself in the complexities of industrial automation. I cultivated relationships with manufacturing clients all over the Southeast, earned Rookie of the Year, and then Top Performer the year after. I genuinely believed I was building a future. Then the cracks started to show. I watched David Finch, my direct supervisor, get promoted to a regional manager role I was more qualified for, despite my sales numbers consistently doubling his. "David has more management experience," Marcus Thorne had explained vaguely. Then I watched David publicly take credit for the Oak Ridge manufacturing deal, a flagship client I'd personally nurtured for 6 exhausting months. Soon after, David got a new company car, while I was still calculating if I could afford the gas for client visits. The betrayals weren't always so overt. Sometimes it was the small things, the little cuts that bleed you dry over time. Meeting invitations that somehow never made it to my inbox. Critical client updates that reached my desk a day too late to be useful. Undermining comments from David in team meetings, like, "Ethan, are you absolutely sure that's the best approach for this particular client?" Always phrased as a question, but delivered as a clear rebuke. I kept my head down. I kept working, kept exceeding targets, believing my results would eventually speak for themselves. That delusion carried me through until last month, when I closed the Keystone Industries contract, a $2 million deal, the largest our division had secured all year. I'd flown to Chicago 3 times to make it happen, using my own credit card because NovaCore couldn't justify the travel expense for a junior salesman. I'd worked through weekends, even missed my cousin's wedding, all to bring that deal home. When the ink was finally dry, Marcus Thorne took the senior sales team out for expensive steaks and single malt scotch to celebrate. Everyone except me. I found out via Instagram posts the following morning. That was the tipping point. When I finally mustered the courage to ask David, for the 3rd time, about the raise he'd promised was in process, he avoided eye contact and mumbled something about Marcus still needing to approve it, and that the timing wasn't great because the company was restructuring compensation packages across the board. That night, fueled by a potent mix of anger and disappointment, I updated my resume for the first time in 4 years. A week later, a LinkedIn message popped up from Sophia Chen. She was a former client I'd always respected, who had recently moved to a senior role at Veridian Solutions. "Ethan, we should catch up," her message read. We met for coffee. She was direct. Veridian was launching a new business development division, and needed someone with proven technical sales experience to lead it. Someone exactly like me. I took one single vacation day, a day I had more than earned, for the interview at Veridian. Apparently, someone from NovaCore with too much time on their hands saw me in the Veridian building lobby and eagerly reported it back to David Finch. That was yesterday, and that's how one vacation day became my termination. I sat in my car in the NovaCore employee parking lot for nearly an hour after security confiscated my badge. The air conditioning hummed, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. I just stared at the building, a monument to 4 years of my life, 4 years of chasing targets, enduring early mornings and late nights, 4 years of hollow reassurances. We'll take care of you, Ethan. You're part of the NovaCore family. Just hang in there. Your time will come. My phone buzzed. A text from David Finch. Sorry about how things went down today. Just following protocol. I switched off my phone without replying and drove home. My apartment felt alien when I walked in. Quieter, emptier, even though nothing had physically changed. I dropped the small box of my office life onto the kitchen counter and cracked open a beer. Then, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I did absolutely nothing. No urgent emails to answer, no client calls to return, no complex proposals to draft or review. I just sat on my couch, sipping my beer, watching the afternoon sun crawl across the living room wall. Around 7, I turned my phone back on. 3 missed calls from my parents. A text from my sister, worried, asking if I was okay. Apparently, David Finch, in a stunning display of boundary crossing, had called her looking for me. And then, an email from Sophia Chen at Veridian Solutions. Ethan, can you come in tomorrow? 10 a.m. The team is very keen to meet you properly. I typed back a single word. Yes. Then I called my parents. They did you a favor, son, my father said after I recounted the day's events. It wasn't the sympathetic outrage I'd expected. How do you figure that, Dad? They showed you exactly who they are, he explained. No more illusions, no more maybes. Now you know for sure. And he was right. All those instances where I'd given NovaCore the benefit of the doubt, all those times I'd internalized their failures as my own shortcomings, not working hard enough, not being visible enough, not playing their political games well enough. All those times I'd swallowed my pride and pushed on, believing loyalty was a two-way street. It wasn't. Not to them. I'd been fired for taking a single day, a day I had more than earned, to explore an opportunity they would clearly never offer me. Fair compensation, genuine respect, a tangible future. My mother's concerned voice came on the line. What do you need, honey? Want us to drive down this weekend? No, Mom, I said, a sudden clarity cutting through the fog. I'm okay. Actually, I think this might be the best thing that could have happened. And I meant it. For the first time in years, I felt something other than bone-deep exhaustion, something besides that persistent low-grade anxiety that had become my shadow. I felt free. That night, I slept like I hadn't in months. The next morning, I put on my best suit, the one I'd bought for those crucial client meetings Marcus Thorne always managed to hijack. I looked in the mirror. I looked rested, ready. The interview at Veridian Solutions exceeded all my hopes. They'd already done their homework, thoroughly checked my references, and spoken to 3 of my key former clients, including the team at Keystone Industries. They knew precisely what I brought to the table. Sophia Chen offered me the position on the spot, Regional Director of Business Development. Double my NovaCore salary, a robust commission structure, a team of 3 sales associates, and an office with a door and a window. I accepted without a moment's hesitation. When can you start? Sophia asked, smiling. I smiled back. Immediately. I signed the contract with Veridian on a Friday afternoon and started the following Monday. They gave me everything NovaCore hadn't: resources, trust, and most importantly, a clear, achievable path forward. We want you to build this new division from the ground up, Ethan, Sophia explained. Your reputation with clients, your integrity, that's why we hired you. The first 2 weeks were a dream. I learned their systems, bonded with my new team, and began formulating a comprehensive growth strategy. I even sent out LinkedIn connection requests to my former colleagues at NovaCore. Most accepted. A few even sent private messages of congratulations and support. Marcus Thorne and David Finch, predictably, remained silent. I didn't care. I was too busy feeling like I was finally where I was supposed to be. Then the certified letter arrived, typed on expensive NovaCore letterhead, signed by their corporate counsel. Mr. Hayes is in direct violation of his non-compete agreement, it read. He is hereby ordered to terminate his employment with Veridian Solutions immediately or face significant legal action. My blood ran cold. I'd never signed a non-compete. I was absolutely certain of it. I frantically called Veridian's legal department. Don't worry, Ethan, their chief counsel, a calm woman named Ms. Albright, reassured me. Send me copies of all your onboarding paperwork from NovaCore. We'll look into this. I spent that evening tearing through my old files. My original offer letter, my employment agreement, my last glowing performance review, nothing. Not a single word about a non-compete, no restrictions on future employment. The next day, NovaCore's lawyers sent over a scanned document. A non-compete agreement, dated 3 years ago, right after I'd won that Rookie of the Year award. It barred me from working for any perceived competitor within a 100-mile radius for 1 year after leaving NovaCore. And there, at the bottom, was my signature. Or at least, a signature that looked chillingly like mine. But I had no memory, absolutely no recollection, of ever seeing that document before in my life. Ethan, Ms. Albright asked gently over the phone, did you ever sign a stack of documents during a performance review? Perhaps something they told you was just routine HR paperwork? My mind flashed back. 3 years ago, my first big review after the award. Marcus Thorne had slid a thick stack of papers across his desk. Just standard updates, Ethan, he'd said dismissively. Sign at the yellow flags. I'd trusted him. I'd signed. They're claiming Veridian Solutions is a direct competitor, Ms. Albright, Veridian's counsel explained, which is a significant stretch, given you now sell advanced software solutions and NovaCore sells industrial robotics. But make no mistake, Ethan, they're pressing this aggressively. This could get protracted and expensive. The familiar knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. Will I lose my job over this? I asked, the words tasting like ash. Not if I can help it, she said firmly. But be prepared, Ethan. If they're this determined, they might try to damage your reputation in the process. It felt deeply personal, and it was about to get more so. The next day, I received a forwarded email from the head of procurement at Keystone Industries, my biggest former client at NovaCore. Ethan, it read, just had a rather unsettling call from your old boss, Marcus Thorne. He subtly implied you might have taken proprietary client information when you left, wanted to know if you'd been in contact. I assured him you'd always conducted yourself with the utmost integrity. Thought you should know. What on earth is going on over there? I forwarded it to Missy Albright, my hands trembling with a rage I hadn't felt before. They weren't just trying to stop me from working. They were actively trying to destroy my professional reputation, the very foundation of my career, the one thing they hadn't been able to diminish despite their best efforts. That evening, my phone rang, an unknown number. Ethan? This is Olivia from accounting at NovaCore. Her voice was low, hushed, almost a whisper. I probably shouldn't be calling you, but you were always decent to me, and what they're doing, it's not right. You need to know something. What is it, Olivia? I asked, my heart pounding. They're telling everyone you stole client files before you left. But it's a lie, Ethan. I saw Marcus Thorne himself in the server room the day after you were fired. He was at your old workstation, downloading your entire client contact folder and sales history onto a flash drive. Then he had IT wipe your network drive and told them you must have deleted the files and taken copies. Olivia, would you be willing to tell this to my attorney? Provide an affidavit? I pleaded. There was a pause, filled with her audible fear. I can't, she whispered. I'm sorry. I need this job. My family. I just thought you deserved to know what you're really up against. She hung up before I could even thank her. I sat in my new office, staring out the window at the Raleigh skyline, the city lights blurring. This wasn't going to be a simple legal skirmish. They weren't just trying to sideline me. They were trying to obliterate me. And for the first time since I'd been fired, the initial shock and strange sense of liberation were completely overshadowed by a cold, hard anger. The legal battle intensified over the following weeks. Veridian Solutions stood firmly by me, but the stress was immense. Every few days brought a fresh, baseless accusation from NovaCore's legal team: corporate espionage, breach of fiduciary duty, intellectual property theft. It was a relentless barrage, a clear strategy of throwing mud in the hope that some of it would stick. "We need more leverage, Ethan," Ms. Albright said during one of our strategy sessions. "Right now, regarding the non-compete, it's essentially your word against theirs about its legitimacy, and even though we strongly suspect it's a forgery, proving that conclusively in court will be a long and costly fight." I nodded, my mind racing, thinking about Olivia's call, about Marcus in the server room. There was a clear pattern of deceit, a disturbing willingness to fabricate evidence. Then a thought struck me. "What about my commission payments?" I asked suddenly. The last quarter I was at NovaCore, I closed the Keystone Industries deal. $2 million. My commission on that alone should have been substantial, but my final paycheck was just my regular salary. No bonus, no commission payout. Ms. Albright made a note. "Good," she said. "That's tangible. That's something concrete we can pursue aggressively. Failure to pay earned commissions is a serious breach." That evening, I got a text message. It was from David Finch. "Ethan, we need to talk. Not about the legal stuff directly. It's important. Urgent." Against my better judgment, wary of a trap, I agreed to meet him at a neutral coffee shop, halfway between our respective offices. He looked like a wreck. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, his usually crisp shirt was rumpled, and his whole demeanor lacked its typical polished arrogance. "I can't officially be having this conversation," he said as soon as he slumped into the chair opposite me, his voice strained. "If Marcus knew, I could lose everything." I just waited, saying nothing. He nervously stirred his coffee, avoiding my gaze. "The non-compete," he finally blurted out. It's not just you, Ethan. Marcus has been doing this for years. Gets people to sign what they think is routine HR paperwork during performance reviews. Then his assistant adds or swaps in other pages later, like the non-compete clause. The signatures are usually genuine, but the documents themselves aren't what people actually agreed to or signed in full. "Why are you telling me this now, David?" I asked, my voice devoid of warmth. He finally looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and something that might have been shame. "Because you're not the first person they've railroaded like this, but you're the first one who's truly fighting back, and with a company like Veridian behind you, they're scared, really scared." "Why would they be scared of me? I just want to do my job and be left alone." David leaned forward, lowering his voice even further. "It's not just about the non-compete, Ethan. It's about the money, the commission structure at NovaCore. It isn't what anyone thinks it is. The percentages in our employment contracts, the ones they show us, they're not the real figures used for payouts." My mind reeled. All those deals, all that revenue I'd generated, the commission checks that never quite matched my own careful calculations, the bonuses that were always mysteriously less than promised due to adjustments, reserve accounts, or overhead allocations that were never clearly explained. "Marcus Thorne has been systematically skimming from every major sales commission for years," David whispered, his face pale. "That's why they're coming after you so hard now. They're terrified you'll stumble upon it, that you'll start asking the right questions about your missing Keystone commission and unravel the whole damn thing." "How do you know all this, David?" I pressed, keeping my voice steady despite the storm of revelations brewing inside me. "How do you know Marcus is skimming commissions?" David Finch shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the picture of a man caught in a trap of his own making. I found the real books, he admitted, his voice barely audible above the coffee shop hum. It was an accident. I was looking for an old client file on Marcus's office computer when he was unexpectedly called out to a long meeting. His main spreadsheets were still open on the screen. 2 completely separate sets of commission calculations for the entire sales team. The actual earned amounts, based on contract values, and our stated percentages, and then the amounts that were actually paid out. The difference, a substantial sum, was being funneled into an account cryptically labeled Executive Performance Fund. And you didn't say anything? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. David's face flushed a dull red. I confronted him privately, he mumbled. He wasn't even fazed. He offered me a cut, said it was standard practice at the executive level, that the senior team had always managed discretionary bonuses this way. He told me I'd finally earned my place at the table. So you took it? My question hung in the air. He didn't deny it. Look, Ethan, I have a mortgage, kids in private school. I convinced myself it was just how high-level business worked, a perk of management. So why tell me all this now, David? Why risk exposing yourself? He leaned closer, his eyes darting around the coffee shop. Because they're not just trying to ruin your career with this non-compete nonsense. They're actively setting you up as a scapegoat. Marcus has been telling the board members that you fraudulently manipulated the Keystone Industries contract numbers, that you inflated the deal specifics to get a massively unearned commission payout. He's claiming that's why you supposedly stole client files, to cover up this imaginary fraud they're now pinning on you. I felt a chill creep down my spine. It was a lie, a complete fabrication, but a dangerous one. That's insane, I said. Keystone Industries can verify every detail of that contract. They've already started creating a false paper trail, David warned. Backdated emails, subtly revised contract drafts in their internal system. They are meticulous, Ethan, and they have vast resources to make their version of the truth stick. I studied David's anxious face, searching for any hint of deception. Why should I believe you, David? You've never had my back before. You stood by while Marcus took credit for my work, while my raises disappeared. He hesitated, then reached for his phone. Because I kept receipts, he said quietly. He navigated through his photo gallery and email, showing me a series of screenshots. Commission spreadsheets with damning discrepancies. Email exchanges between Marcus and the CFO discussing the Executive Performance Fund. Even redacted images of internal bank transfer summaries. It was all there, clear evidence of the systematic theft he'd described. Send those to me, I said, my voice firm. All of them. Ethan, if I do that, I'm finished at NovaCore. Probably finished in this entire industry if Marcus finds out. You already are, David, I replied, my gaze unwavering. The only question now is whether you go down with them when this inevitably blows up, or if you help me expose the truth and maybe, just maybe, find a sliver of redemption. David stared at me for a long, agonizing moment, the internal conflict warring on his face. Then, with a deep sigh of resignation, he began forwarding the files to my email address. The evidence David provided was explosive. It transformed my case from a defense against a bogus non-compete into a potential offensive against widespread corporate fraud. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about potentially dozens of current and former NovaCore employees who had been systematically cheated out of their rightful earnings for years. The scheme, as far as we could tell from David's initial information, had been running for at least 5 years, affecting millions of dollars in compensation. This is far bigger than a non-compete dispute, Ethan, Ms. Albright confirmed grimly when I presented her with David's documents later that day. This is systematic, premeditated fraud on a grand scale. But we had a significant hurdle. David, terrified of prosecution and personal ruin, was unwilling to go on record. His screenshots and forwarded emails, while damning, would likely be challenged as hearsay in court, without his direct, sworn testimony. And NovaCore, with its deep pockets and aggressive legal team, could easily tie the case up in costly litigation for years, bleeding Veridian and me dry. "We need more," Ms. Albright stated. "We need someone with first-hand knowledge of this scheme, someone who isn't already compromised like David, and someone who is willing to testify under oath." I thought about Olivia from accounting, but she was clearly too intimidated to get involved officially. I needed someone who had less to lose, or perhaps someone who felt they had already lost everything because of NovaCore's corruption. That night, I sat down and made a list of every senior salesperson who had left NovaCore Dynamics over the past 2 or 3 years. I focused on those who had resigned suddenly or been terminated under questionable or vague circumstances. People who, like me, might have started asking uncomfortable questions about their commission statements. One name jumped out from the list: Daniel Carter. He had been a consistent top performer in the Eastern region, known for his integrity, until he abruptly resigned about a year ago. At the time, ugly rumors, likely company-planted, circulated about him developing a drinking problem and performance issues. I'd never believed those rumors. Daniel was a dedicated family man, heavily involved in his local church, and one of the most principled individuals I'd ever worked with. I found him on LinkedIn. He was now working for a much smaller local firm, undoubtedly making significantly less than he had at NovaCore. Taking a deep breath, I sent him a concise message. "Daniel, it's Ethan Hayes, formerly of NovaCore. Need to talk to you urgently about Marcus Thorne and commission practices at NovaCore. I believe it's critically important." He responded within 5 minutes. "Ethan, I've been waiting for this call for a very long time." We met the next day at a quiet diner far from either of our offices. Daniel Carter didn't look like a man battling addiction. He looked like a man who had been shouldering an unbearable weight for far too long. "They fired me because I found the spreadsheets," he said, his voice low but firm, even before our coffee arrived. "The same ones David Finch eventually showed you, I imagine. But I dug deeper, Ethan. I documented everything. I meticulously tracked the money. It wasn't just about skimming sales commissions. It was systemic. Fraudulent expense account reimbursements, illegal kickbacks from certain preferred vendors, massively inflated project costs on client invoices that were then pocketed internally." Marcus Thorne and the CFO, Arthur Lexington, had an entire shadow accounting system set up. "Do you have proof? Hard proof?" I asked, leaning forward. Daniel nodded slowly. "I have everything. Encrypted bank records, copies of original and falsified invoices, damning internal email chains, detailed notes on their entire operational structure." I was discreetly building a comprehensive case to take to the main board of directors, the independent ones, not the executive cronies, when Marcus somehow found out what I was doing. His face tightened. Next thing I knew, the whispers started. Rumors about my alleged drinking problem, about me being unreliable. Then a key client suddenly lodged a formal complaint, claiming I showed up to an important meeting intoxicated. A meeting, Ethan, that I never even attended. I was out of state at a family funeral that day. 2 weeks later, I was forced out, smeared and silenced. "Why didn't you fight back then? Go to the authorities with what you had?" Daniel's gaze flickered with a pain that was still raw. "They threatened my family," he said, his voice steady, but his hands, resting on the table, trembled almost imperceptibly. "Nothing direct, nothing provable in court, of course. Just a friendly chat with one of Marcus's less reputable associates, mentioning how my wife's nursing license at City Memorial might face unexpected scrutiny if I caused unnecessary trouble. Subtle hints about how my kids' scholarships at their private school could suddenly be revoked due to administrative errors. They have connections, Ethan. They made that abundantly clear." I felt a wave of nausea. This was beyond corporate greed. This was outright thuggery. "But you kept all the evidence?" "Every single bit of it," Daniel confirmed. "Stored on multiple encrypted drives, kept off-site in secure locations. I've been waiting, Ethan, waiting for someone else to notice the rot. Someone they couldn't intimidate or silence in the same way." "Someone like me," I said, understanding dawning. Daniel nodded. You don't have a local family they can easily leverage here. You've already been fired and publicly attacked, so you have less to lose in that regard. And most importantly, he added, a flicker of hope in his eyes, you have Veridian Solutions behind you. They have resources, real legal firepower. We spent the next 3 intensive hours meticulously going through Daniel Carter's mountain of evidence. It was far worse, far more extensive and damning than I could have ever imagined. It wasn't just Marcus Thorne and the CFO. It implicated at least half of NovaCore's senior executive team. They had been systematically defrauding their own hardworking sales force, and likely their clients and shareholders, of millions upon millions of dollars for at least 5 years, possibly longer. We need to take this directly to the federal authorities, Daniel, I said, the path forward suddenly crystal clear. This isn't just a civil matter anymore. This is organized crime. I'm ready, Daniel replied, his resolve solidifying. But we need to be strategic. These people are dangerous. They won't go down without a vicious fight. That night, I laid everything out for Sophia Chen and Ms. Albright at Veridian. The full extent of Daniel's findings, the risks involved. This could get incredibly messy in public, I warned. I completely understand if Veridian wants to distance itself from this now. Sophia's response was immediate and unwavering. Distance ourselves, Ethan? Absolutely not. We hired you because of your integrity, because you represent the right way to do business. We're not just going to support you through your personal legal battle. We're going to help you bring these crooks to justice. NovaCore has been operating unethically for far too long, poisoning the reputation of our entire industry. It's time someone with courage and evidence finally stood up to them. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt a genuine surge of optimism. I felt like we might actually win. With Daniel Carter's meticulously compiled evidence and Veridian Solutions' formidable legal and financial backing, we didn't just file a countersuit against NovaCore for wrongful termination and defamation. We compiled a comprehensive whistleblower report and took everything, every spreadsheet, every email, every falsified record, directly to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the State Attorney General's office, bypassing lower courts. The official investigation moved with astonishing speed. Bank records were subpoenaed globally. Current and former NovaCore employees were deposed under oath. Once word got out that a serious investigation was underway, other former employees, previously too scared to speak, began coming forward with their own stories of manipulated commissions and suspicious accounting practices. 3 weeks after our initial confidential filing with the authorities, federal agents, armed with extensive warrants, walked into NovaCore Dynamics corporate headquarters. I wasn't there to witness it, but David Finch called me that evening, his voice a hollow wreck. They took everything, Ethan, he choked out. Computers, servers, every financial file going back years. Marcus and Arthur Lexington. They were both escorted out of the building by federal agents, in front of everyone. I said nothing, just listened. I've been suspended indefinitely, pending the outcome of the investigation, David continued, his voice cracking. My lawyer says I could face serious criminal charges. You probably will, David, I replied, my voice devoid of sympathy. But your belated cooperation now might count for something, however small. A week later, NovaCore's external counsel formally and unconditionally dropped their lawsuit against me. 2 days after that, their stock price plummeted by over 70% as the first official news of the sweeping fraud investigation hit the major business news outlets. Almost immediately, a massive class action lawsuit was filed by a consortium of former NovaCore salespeople seeking recovery of years of unpaid and stolen commissions. Major clients, terrified of being associated with the mushrooming scandal, started terminating their contracts en masse. Throughout all this public turmoil, I kept my head down. I focused on building my new division at Veridian Solutions. I declined all media interview requests. I didn't post a single gloating comment on social media. I just did my job. Then, one morning, about 3 months to the day after I had been unceremoniously fired, an official court order arrived by courier. NovaCore Dynamics, now under emergency interim management appointed by the courts, was ordered to pay me $147,000 in illegally withheld back commissions, plus interest and punitive damages. The check itself arrived the following week. I didn't cash it immediately. I just set it on my desk for a few days, looking at it from time to time. Not because I needed the validation of the money itself, but because I wanted a tangible reminder of what it had cost and what it had taken to arrive at the truth. 1 year later, I stood before the entire Veridian Solutions national sales team, presenting our division's quarterly results. We had doubled our projected revenue, successfully expanded into 2 new key markets, and built a stellar reputation for honesty and, crucially, for complete transparency with our commission structures. That reputation was now attracting top sales talent from across the industry, including, ironically, 3 highly skilled former NovaCore employees who had been part of the successful class action settlement. The news about NovaCore Dynamics had largely faded from the headlines. Marcus Thorne and Arthur Lexington had eventually taken plea deals to avoid longer sentences, pleading guilty to multiple counts of wire fraud and conspiracy. David Finch, having cooperated extensively with prosecutors, avoided jail time but received a lengthy probation and was permanently barred from working in the financial services or sales leadership sectors again. His career was effectively over. The company itself, or what was left of it, had been quietly acquired by a much larger competitor for pennies on the dollar, its brand tarnished beyond repair. I rarely thought about any of them anymore. After the sales meeting, Sophia Chen pulled me aside. "The board officially approved your promotion to Vice President of Business Development, Ethan," she said, a warm smile on her face. "It's effective next month. Congratulations. You've more than earned it." I thanked her, genuinely grateful, but not entirely surprised. We were building something real at Veridian, something based on integrity and mutual respect, and it was working. That evening, I drove out to my parents' house for dinner. They'd moved to Raleigh 6 months prior, partly to be closer to me, and partly because my father was finally, truly ready to embrace retirement. He'd followed every twist and turn of the NovaCore saga with an almost obsessive interest, often more invested in my ultimate vindication than I sometimes felt I was. "So proud of you, son," he said, as we sat on his back porch after dinner, watching the Carolina sunset paint the sky. "Not because you won in the end, not because of the money, but because you handled it all the right way. You didn't let them make you bitter. You didn't let them change who you fundamentally are." I nodded, appreciating his words, watching the light fade through the tall pine trees. "It was never about getting back at them, Dad," I said quietly. "I know," he replied, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "It was always about the truth." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the crickets starting their nightly chorus. "So," he finally said, a playful grin spreading across his face. "Vice President, huh? Does this mean you're finally going to trade in that old Honda for something a bit more executive?" I laughed. "Maybe someday, Dad, but I think I'll keep the Honda a little longer. It reminds me of something important." "What's that?" he asked. "That the fastest way up isn't about cutting corners or climbing over other people," I said. "It's about building something that lasts, something you can be proud of." My father raised his glass of iced tea. "I'll drink to that, son." And so did I. Thank you for joining us on Life Stories for Ethan's incredible journey. If you believe in standing up for the truth and want more stories of resilience and justice, please hit that subscribe button, like this video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. We value your support. Musikas Nishamin.